lot of people. Hello, everybody. Come on, you call yourself communicators. Hello, everybody. Wonderful. First of all, I'd like to thank Praxis for inviting me today. Extremely honored to be speaking on this stage to such a wonderful and esteemed audience. I've actually been in India for a whole week. So I can assure you that a week ago I was 2 kilos lighter. I just want to tell you that. The food has been fantastic. So we always say start with a story. So I want to start with a little story. I'm British, as you can probably tell, but I live in America. I started off with EMC in 2010 as a regional communications director, and then I was asked to come and move to the States to take the global role a couple of years later. So literally moved my whole family and we shifted to the States. My daughter looked at me like this and said, "Mom, you've ruined my life." She was 5 years old at the time. She's got over it now, she's 11. But we moved to the States, and 2 years after that, or 3 years after that, Dell came to us, and we decided to merge with Dell. So the biggest merger in Dell, in technology history, was the Dell EMC merger. 70,000 people and 70,000 people coming together into a company with 140,000 people. And I always said I'd never work for a big company. Okay, so huge communication challenge, and certainly a demonstration of how I've been through an incredible amount of change in just the last 8-10 years. But I know that I'm not alone in terms of going through change. I'm sure every single one of you are going through change, whether it's in your industry, whether it's in communications. We are in a dynamic world. Why is it a dynamic world? Because there are so many different forces of change that are happening at the same time. And I'd like to just talk about 3 of those before I talk about how storytelling can really, we need to change storytelling to create real impact in this new world. The first one is emerging technology. Well, it makes sense that I talk about technology. I work for Dell, and by the way, we're not just the computer company or the PC company. We also are number 1 in storage in the data center, and number 1 in servers, and a whole bunch of other things as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about emerging technology. We'll also talk about the communication landscape and the social climate and how that's changed too. So let's start with emerging technology. There are many emerging technologies, and they're not all on this slide. If you think about, apparently we're all going to be living on Mars by 2030, eating food that's grown there. But until then, there are other things that are happening more closer to home. So 5G, a technology that's coming. India is very much a part of that, as you know. Cisco are predicting that once 5G comes, 80% of the internet traffic will be video. So that's a huge implication for us as communicators. Think about IoT, the Internet of Everything, where everything will be connected. Now, people may be connected, but this is where a wheel on a bus will be giving in data, or a jet engine on a spaceship will be giving information. So everything will be connected and giving information. How will it be analyzed? Well, using artificial intelligence, of course, to help us to sift through those masses of data and give us insights. I do think about what are the implications of AI for communications. And I wonder sometimes if we're going to have AI and robots writing our press releases, or even replacing reporters and writing articles. I listen to my husband every morning say, "Alexa, give me the news." And I think, oh my goodness, does that mean I've got to brief Alexa with news? At the moment, they're not on my target list, so Alexa be on my target list. So, I don't know how things are going to change, but it's very interesting. The other one that's very close to our heart as well at Dell is immersive technology. Think of virtual reality and augmented reality. So most people, some people know the difference, some people don't. So quick lesson in the difference between the two. Virtual reality, I put on my headset, and suddenly here I am in Hawaii. I can see the waves, I can hear the waves, and I'm really in an interesting space. Augmented reality, I put on my augmented reality headset. I'm still in this room, and I can see all of you, but perhaps I can see your name above your head, who you work for, and maybe what you do. Could be quite interesting for networking later, and huge implications for communications going forward as well. Think about a product launch where you can give somebody, a reporter, an augmented reality headset so he can look at the product and you can explain the features as he's looking at it. You might say, well, this is way off, this isn't going to happen. I talked about jet engines earlier. We have a customer that we're working with right now who uses augmented reality for maintenance and fixing of things like jet engines. So they stand in front of the jet engine, an engineer. He may be new to the job, and he can see very clearly what he can do and what he can't do, and the instructions will be given to him overlaid over the jet engine. For example, don't press the red button. So, real good applications there. Blockchain, we know about blockchain. It's going to provide huge transparency for transactions. So whether you're moving money or goods or anything else, you'll see it move through the system, completely transparent. And we've had, lots of publicity in the past about terrorists moving money around, not being able to track it. That will go away. So we're moving to a much more transparent world. So what do business leaders in India think? We do a survey every year. This is 3,800 business leaders. And these results are stunning to me. I've been doing research for 30 years. All right, maybe a few less. All right, it is 30. 62% of us don't know what our industry is going to look like in 3 years. Don't know what our industry is going to look like. I've never seen that before. And 68% in India are saying that they've already received disruption in their industries in the last 3 years. So it started, and I'm sure many of us have felt this before. And what's really struggling, and by the way, half of this sample were IT leaders. What's really, really stunning is that 40% are struggling to keep up with the change in tech. And that's even worse globally. Nearly 60% are struggling to keep up with the pace of change. So we are really in a serious issue here with change. So in terms of technology, we're going to see absolute profound disruption everywhere in every single industry if we haven't already. We're going to be in a much more transparent world. Everything will be connected. Everything, but literally, will be connected. And we'll have fully immersive virtual experiences as part of our communications. And intelligent machines. All right, what's changing in the communication landscape? Well, the good news here is that most of you are aware of this, and I'm sure you could each of you deliver this part of the presentation. But some of the numbers are stunning. So this actually kills me as a British person, but I'm going to use American numbers. The reason why is because the States is usually slightly ahead and shows the trend of where the market is going to. And as I say, that kills me to say that as a Brit, but it is often true. In the United States, only 20% of people are reading physical newspapers today. 20%. And that goes down to 5% when you're talking about the under 35s. Now, I know that readership of printed materials is going up in India as literacy increases. But as that tails off, you'll see that trend coming here too. In every other country in the world, pretty much, that is the situation. And of course, we prefer to watch it on a screen, or listen to it, or read it on a screen, whether it's TV, whether it's the laptop, or whether it's the mobile phone. And 81% are getting that information from the internet, 3/4 of which on the mobile phone. Now, just a few years ago, that was half of us, and now it's nearly 3/4 of us on the mobile phone, and that's no surprise, right? So mobile cannot be ignored at this point. So, internet going up, we know this. Social media going up. Again, another stunning fact for me. I'm nearly 50, right? And next year, nearly 50. And so this is a stunning one for me. We saw search engines come in. Most of us search for news on search engines, right? Except we've just reached the tipping point now where more people are searching for news on social media than they are on search. And just think about that for a moment. More people are using social media than search to search for news. 42% of Americans say that Facebook is their go-to place for news. So if we don't think that social media is a news channel, we're in trouble, because it is. Oops, let's go back one. I talked about screens and how we prefer to watch things on a screen, and it's very clear that visual content is more important today than ever before, and we've heard this from some of the great speakers that have been on the stage this morning and this afternoon. So as you guys know all about this stuff, there's a little pop quiz to come. How many more times do you think visual content can be shared compared to non-visual content? Is it twice as much? Is it 10 times as much? Or is it 40 times as much? If you think it's twice as much, put your hand up. No one. Do you think it's 10 times as much? Put your hands up. Okay, quite a few hands there. Yeah, 10 times as much, which is a lot. Or is it 40 times more likely to be shared? Yes, you're absolutely right. It's 40 times more likely to be shared. And by the same token, I wonder if readership, just including a color image, a simple color image in a story, how much will that increase our readership? Maybe it won't increase our readership. 0. Any hands? No? Will it increase our readership by 50%? Couple of people. Will it increase it by 80%? Oh, you are so getting the hang of this. Yes, 80%. So I say to my team, ignore visual images at your peril, right? Because you've just alienated a bunch of readers that are now no longer going to look at your content, and they're not going to share it. So a visual image can make all the difference. The other thing is, of course, and Sri talked a little bit about this morning, anyone can break a story anytime. As you know, all we need is a mobile phone and Periscope or Facebook Live or something similar, and you could stand at an event. We're not waiting for newscasters to turn up with their vans to break a story. It can happen anytime. And by the same token, our team members can do the same thing, our employees. Interestingly enough, time and time again, I see stories break externally before they break internally. Has anyone seen this? Where a salesman is driving to work, and driving to their client, and they get to their client, and their client says, "Oh, I heard that you launched X yesterday or this morning," and the sale guy goes, "Oh, really?" That's not what we want, right? We need to inform our team members just slightly ahead of our reporters and everything else. And if it's a top secret story, then do it 10 minutes before. If we don't, we're treating them like a second-class citizen. Worse than that, an employee is like to have 7 times more connections than the company itself. So whether you have 20 employees or 140,000 employees like Dell, you're going to get 7 times more connections. They're also getting twice as much more engagement on their post. So again, when you're thinking about your campaigns and PR, don't think in isolation. If you don't look after internal comms, go talk to the internal comms people. How can I get the story to our team members first and use them? And of course, always be prepared for leaks. But I know as PR people, I don't need to tell you that. So, I don't think it's traditional or digital. I think it's traditional plus digital. Absolutely. Both work, and I'm going to talk a little bit about traditional in a minute. It's not, it's still there. It's still hanging in there. Social media is a news channel, and we've got to get comfortable with that. It's really, really noisy out there. There are so many digital channels. So we've got to break through creatively. We've got to be visual. We've got to do something different and unique. And of course, seeing is believing. And think mobile first. If your content doesn't work in mobile, you've just alienated a whole ton of your audience who are going to go, you know what, I can't get to the link on my mobile. I can't see this. I'm not going to bother. So think as well inside out. How can we use the team members to promote a story? Okay, last one, social climate. According to the Edelman Trust Barometer, trust is falling. We are less trusting of pretty much every institution out there. In the USA, and I'm talking like government, corporates, everything. And the USA has had the largest drop in trust than ever before in the history of this survey. And India, we're seeing it too. There's a few pockets where we're seeing trust rising, like China, but generally speaking, trust is falling. And another thing about the social climate is we've had enough. How many people have heard of the Me Too movement? Yeah, of course you have, because a movement takes 10 minutes these days to go from zero to, ubiquitous and everywhere. But we've had enough of women have had enough of being treated in that way, and there's a huge movement. We've also seen really high cases of fraud and deception from people who are either using our data in inappropriate ways, giving it to governments that we'd rather not share it with, or the CEOs are caught doing something that we'd rather our CEOs did not do. I'm not going to call out any of those cases because they're, but for the grace of God, go all of us. But clearly there's a ton of cases there. And also social media. Look at what happened with a certain app in India inciting racial hatred or hatred in general and violence, and we've seen that. So again, another reason why our trust is falling. In terms of privacy, we see in Europe they've introduced legislation called the General Data Protection Regulations, and that means that in Europe now you own your data. It's not Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter that own your data. You own your data, and you can opt in and out. The rest of the world, who owns our data? Are pictures of my daughter being shared with the Russians? I don't know. And of course, the other thing, and you've heard a lot about this today, particularly from Nazim and others, about protecting our planet. Wherever you feel on this kind of social climate debate, no one is saying, let's pollute the planet more. So we all care that there's too many plastics in our oceans, or that the ice caps are melting, or there's too much pollution in our air, and we, quite frankly, have had enough. We've had enough. So trust is falling. I don't need to tell you about the decade of fake news. A couple of people have mentioned fake news. How many people think that they could recognize fake news or clickbait and so on if they saw it? How many people think they'd be able to recognize it if they saw it? Okay, a few hands going up. Let me tell you a story. This is Elizabeth Holmes. Anyone heard of her? She was a CEO of a company called Theranos. Theranos were a really interesting company out of Silicon Valley. And what they said they could do is they said you could take just a pinprick of blood and they could do a whole load of tests for a number of diseases, and it would be really quick. They said they had technology that could do that. So rather than vials of blood, just one pinprick, they had a nano container that would transport the blood to them, and they had technology that they could put it into, and it could do a whole load of tests really, really quickly. Silicon Valley went crazy. They got about $700 million of funding, and you can see on the cover of Forbes magazine, Fortune magazine, Inc., etc., etc., etc. She was ablaze everywhere. Turned out, it was fake news. It turns out they were taking blood in traditional ways, in vials. They were taking it back to their compounds, and they were using equipment produced by other companies to test it. It was a big fraud. It took just one journalist who did some real journalism, a guy called John Carreyrou, who uncovered this. So we think we can recognize fake news, but actually when I see it on the front of Fortune magazine, I just assume that somebody has actually done some work to investigate that story. Not the case, and this isn't even kind of clickbait social media type news. Okay, so it's not surprising then that this survey uncovered this year that 7 out of 10 of us are really worried about fake news. And around 60% of us think it's really hard to recognize a fake news story. And actually now it's 59-60, because I agree too. So it's not surprising then that trust in the media is falling, which you could say is not good for us. It's not all bad though, because most people define in this survey media as including search engines and social media, and trust in those two has plummeted. The good news for PR is that people are trusting journalists more. Right? So we have an opportunity here to brief journalists. Believe it or not, they also trust CEOs more, and technical experts and subject matter experts. So if we can get subject matter experts, CEOs, etc., experts, our leaders talking in front of journalists, then this is still a credible piece of news. So don't let anyone tell you that traditional is dead. It absolutely is not. Social has a huge role to play, and so does traditional. I just want to talk, if we're going to talk about social climate, we can't do that without talking about a millennial or a Gen Z and how they're changing society. How many of you identify yourself as a millennial? I don't think there'll be any Gen Z in the room, maybe. I so want to be a millennial. But they want companies to represent more than just profit. And actually, so do I. I'm not a millennial, but many of us want organizations now to have a little bit more purpose behind them. And here's another pop quiz. What percentage of Gen Z do you think would actually take a pay cut to work for a socially responsible company? This take a pay cut. And think about whether you would do it. Just shout out a number. What percentage? 50? I've got some t-shirts to give away, by the way. So, over 50. Do you want to give me a number? 70 to 80? Anyone else? It's a bit, not quite. Did you say 60? Give this lady a t-shirt, please. It's actually 62% of millennials and Gen Zs would take a pay cut. And a round of applause. Okay, one more. What percentage of millennials would switch brands associated with the cause? Don't forget, millennials are not just team members, they're also consumers. So they could switch our brand if we're not associated with a good cause. Did you say 70? 85? Who said 90? You're absolutely right, and you get a t-shirt. The answer is, basically, nearly every millennial would take a pay cut to work for a company, would switch brands to a company that's associated with a good cause. So we could do all the PRing we like. If we're not associated with a good cause, they will go somewhere else and they'll go to the competition. They also are pretty fed up with businesses and the way they behave. They don't think that trust is falling there. They don't think we behave ethically. They think that leaders are not committed, I should say, to improving society. And they think that most leaders have no ambition other than to make money. And that's I work for a corporate, and that's a really sad state of affairs. But I think they've got a point. I don't want my daughter to grow up in an environment where she gets sexually harassed in the workplace or has to live in a polluted environment. So it's not just millennials that actually care about this stuff. I know many of us do too. So purpose really, really matters. My boss, Michael Dell, he would agree. He says that human and machines come together to solve problems. And at our core, it's about helping advance human progress through technology. That is our purpose, and that's what we talk about as our purpose. And by the way, Michael, right from the get-go when he started the company a few decades ago, he said there's going to be an ethical company from day one, and that's been the case. And if you look at someone like Mark Benioff from Salesforce, who's known for this sort of thing, and I've spoken to him about this personally, he says that we need a corporate mission. Every company needs a corporate mission that's bigger than making a profit. And if you don't know how Salesforce do that, it's really interesting read. They have a one-for-one to one give-back program that he started when his company was nothing. Now it's a $10 billion company, and he says it's a lot more complex doing that now, but he's absolutely kept it in place. And if you're all about profit, then Paul Pullman says that purpose-driven brands actually grow ahead of the market in his company. And the brands that, they're actually growing twice the rate of his other brands in his organization. So there we go. That's us making a choice and buying brands that are associated with good causes and with purpose in reality. Okay, so caring matters, trust matters. It's at the time, we've got to go quicker. So ethical is not a nice to have anymore. Ethical is a must have. We need to stand for more than profit, and we need to think about authenticity and purpose. But actions speak louder than words. It should not be just a plaque on the wall. We need to show it, and you've seen lots of companies show that today. We need to prove it. So what about inventing stories? If we're going to reinvent stories, we don't want to move away from impact, right? We still need to have stories with impact. And because I'm a simple person, things need to be simple in my head. This is my recipe for success. I for integrated, M for message, P for purpose-driven, A for audience, C for creative, and T for transparent. Let's just unpack those quickly. So I for integrated. In my view, campaigns need to be integrated with marketing where possible. If you're going to do something big, make sure we don't do it in a silo. Think about internal comms, think about other audiences, and think about it being traditional and social and digital, all coming together as one. Here's a quick video on us introducing our thought leadership campaign, which was about realizing 2030. We realized that our customers were very confused with the pace of change and understanding the future. So we started to paint a picture of what the future could look like. And here's how we introduced it to the world. Okay, so actually all of these examples introduce the I, the M, the P, the A, the C, and the T, but that was integrated. M is for message. We've heard this morning, keep it clear, keep it clean. I always say it's better to have 3 messages out there than 28, right? Let's be, keep it simple, and less is more. But clarity. I like this example because it came from a team member. I had nothing to do with this one. And they did a great job on really articulating, coming up with a campaign that was around how do we collect all the ocean plastics before they reach the ocean and turn it into packaging for our products. That's it. It took 1 second for me to explain it to you, but let's watch a bit of the video.
Every time plastic finds its way into the ocean, it finds its way into the bellies of seafood and fish.
So we have 2 goals. The first is how do we commercialize in the supply chain so we take something that is very damaging to the environment and create economic value from it. So we looked at our successful history of innovation around packaging materials from bamboo to wheat straw to air carbon and asked ourselves if nobody else was working on this issue of ocean plastic, why not us? This is a sample of what you're going to see. We're going to form some of these up for you.
The rolls that you see here are different mixtures of the ocean plastic with other recycled pellet. So the rolls are actually 100% recycled product.
When you look at this, Adrian, you can see all the imperfections. That's all the contaminants. And so we actually sieved that out for these trials.
Love it. Character. We'll take the plastic in sheet form, put it into a forming machine, heat it up, and then pull the plastic down on top of a mold to make a shape.
Someday, we actually hope to be out of this business, that there's no longer a need for ocean plastic because the recycling infrastructure is there, and we were a part of it at the very beginning.
Okay, so simple message. I said that technology that drives human progress is our purpose at Dell, and we need to try and bring that to life. It actually is not just great for the external and for the customers, which it is, they love it, right? But also for our team members. Our team members get so much out of this. Here is one of my personally favorite stories.
I love my job. We're working on issues that really matter to a large number of people. There's no major symptom when you have hypertension or diabetes or the cancers. And the fact that the poor are disproportionately impacted by these makes them really important to catch early. Preventive screening and early diagnosis and treatment dramatically improve the life expectancy and survival rates. So we looked at how technology could help the health worker do her job better, strengthening the primary healthcare system. So we're essentially creating a health record for every individual who's getting enrolled into the system. They get screened and their health record goes to the cloud, and there the doctors are able to access it.
Okay, so you can see the full video on our website, but really, technology driving human progress. A is for audience. I'm going to try and go through this example quickly. I did say that we went through this massive merger where we brought two completely different companies together, or two technology companies together, and we had a lot of nervous people when we started. Here's what the press thought when we first announced it.
It is official. Dell completing its $67 billion acquisition of data storage company EMC. It's a historic deal because the tech industry's biggest merger ever is this one right here.
Jim, what do you have to say? One quick comment. What do you think about Dell EMC?
Well, we're negative on this space. I wonder why Dell is actually doing this.
I don't know if you heard that. The commentator said, I'm really negative on this. And someone said, I don't understand why Dell is doing this. I think my worst favorite headline was, this is like two dump trucks coming together and they're just going to cancel each other out. And I sat down with my team. That was Richard Waters of the FT, by the way. And I sat down with my team and I said, this is our starting point. It's pretty low. The only way is up. But we also had really, really nervous team members. Even my team and myself, we were from the EMC side. We were nervous. What was going to happen to our jobs? Were we going to still be here in the future? Dell people were nervous. How was management going to change? How is it all going to change? This wasn't being billed as an acquisition. It was being billed as a merger. And Michael Dell was really keen that it was a merger and not just an acquisition. So we had to think about each audience individually and come up with a strategy. And this is what we did.
Our opportunity is to be number one in everything, all in one place.
I can confirm that on June 22nd, the Dell Technologies did achieve a
world record. All right.
Okay, there is a clip at the end that talks, an analyst talking about how he was wrong and how, the company came together and is now a successful company. But I don't have time to show it to you. So, C is for creative. Creative can come out of anything. We had an initiative going on where we were pulling the diesel soot out of the air in Delhi and using it for ink in our packaging. And we thought, how can we creatively do something to show this to the world? And the India team, who's in the room right now, came up with this fabulous idea to use it as ink for a fashion show, for clothing, and for art. And we're actually taking this globally, this idea globally now. So that's the example there, and it was very successful and got lots of coverage. So, these ideas can be very complex. They can cost a lot of money. They can also be very simple way of getting ideas over. And T is for transparent. Lots of companies have had lots of criticism over the years about how they manufacture goods, where they're using, underage workers, or where the workers are having to give a proportion of their salary to third parties in order to get the job, or they're working in really bad conditions that have water dripping in and are dark and dingy and really quite awful. And so we thought, how can we show our customers that actually our factories in China are really great places and we treat people really well, even when we use third parties. So we started taking our customers to China. But not many customers can travel all the way to China to see this. So we created a virtual reality experience. Whoops, the daisy. Hold on. We created a virtual reality experience so that customers could really see what was going on in our factory. And there it is. So it looks a bit strange there, but obviously when you've got your headset in, it's like you're actually in the factory. And they can walk around and they can see for themselves what it's like. So that's just one application of communications in VR. Guys, I've completely run out of time. I'm probably in loads of trouble, but that is my recipe for success for creating impact in this new world. We are no longer the press release department. Thank you. You're here.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Stella, please take a seat. Don't wait for me. That was a fascinating tour, I think, through the kind of contemporary communications landscape. So thank you very much for that.
Pleasure.
We've got around 12 minutes, so I'm going to ask you a few questions. And if we have enough time, I'll try and open it up to the floor. So you started off by talking about how technology is such a disruptive force.
Yeah.
And not necessarily always in a way that inspires confidence. It raises concerns about the future of existing industries and the future of work. And you had research demonstrating how people are struggling with the pace of change. It sometimes seems that companies communicate innovation purely in terms of the benefits without considering the costs, or at least the perceived costs.
Yes.
Do you think there's a problem with how innovation itself is communicated?
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult question for me as somebody who works for a technology company, because we always want to communicate the benefits, but we try and be quite honest about, the other side. For example, we've seen, with mobile phones, addictions in children, etc., or potential addictions. But we have to. I do believe that we need to put our hands up when things, present themselves and talk about them, and we try and do that wherever we can, for sure. And also, how can you give back? And we've seen that a little bit with ITC today, where they were trying to give back to the community in places where, if you're taking away, you also need to give back. The other issue with communicating technology actually is that technology companies often get into the weeds. So we get too technical and we leave some reporters and audiences behind.
Right, okay, interesting. The other point you made, which I thought was really interesting, is this notion that communications is inside out now.
Yeah.
That there's so much noise that you really rely on your staff to be your advocates in the world. So is internal communications attracting the kind of kudos, budget, and talent that has traditionally been the preserve of the external communications
Oh, that is a
department?
fantastic question. If you know the number of meetings I've been in where I've said, we need more budget for internal communications. No, it doesn't. But you can see that when we did our day one of the two companies coming together, we did a 5-city broadcast to the 140,000 employees. We had skydivers, we broke records, we planted trees. I mean, we made it the hugest deal possible. I remember when I went and pitched that particular campaign or ideas, and I went in and we had three layers of this. So we had good, better, and best. And each one had an increasing price tag. And I won't tell you what they were, but there was a significant difference between the bottom one and the top one. And I remember someone saying to me, you need to take the bottom price, the good one, and you need to halve it, and we might get it. And I was like, oh, but these ideas are so good. I want to go present them all. So in the end, just before the presentation, we made a decision to just present the top two. But we started with rationale. We started with, engaged employees are more productive. Engaged employees, and companies that have engaged employees produce bigger profits, right? We started there, and then we started talking about the ideas. And we got every single penny that we asked for and everything that we wanted to do. So I think sometimes you need to start with the why before you ask for the what.
Okay, interesting. And I mean, are you finding now that the talent mix is changing? Because I recall a time when, I mean, I don't want to be too undiplomatic here, but internal comms was kind of seen as the graveyard in terms of the communications function.
Yeah, the place you went to die, right?
Right, well, you said it. But now, of course, when we see CEOs, for example, in interviews, and they often say, my most important audience is my employees. And we see companies changing the way they behave based on employee expectations. But how is that impacting the actual internal comms function? Are you seeing that in terms of, are you seeing more people coming in?
Yeah.
Are you seeing a change in the types of people there?
Yeah, look, we apply exactly the same principles to internal as we do to external. No one wants to be bored to death, right? First of all, no one wants to read all the time. We've said that people are more visual, they're using video. So we try and use visuals in our communications. It still frustrates me when our internal communications people send out emails and it's just, 17 paragraphs of writing. It's not broken up, there's no headlines, there's no visuals. Just treat them like any other audience. We're just people at the end of the day. We also use video a lot. We started something that cost us $0. Well, I say $0. We did buy a camera, and in the end, it wasn't a very expensive camera. We bought a camera. We asked one of our millennials to take that camera and go interview people, and we started to produce a 60-second briefing that went out every week on our intranet that talked about all the different things that we do. It's called Inside in 5, it was really popular and easy to produce, didn't cost us a penny. So, use this. So we're looking for lots of those new skills that we use right across communications. Not just in PR, not just in our digital team, but everywhere, including internal.
And that kind of ties in quite neatly with your point about how the storytelling model has changed. You shared several examples of that. How is that impacting the kind of talent that you're bringing into your function? And perhaps, given the relatively youthful look of so many people in this room, perhaps you have some advice in terms of the skills that people should be looking to develop and how that's changing.
Yeah, well, I had a dual problem. We didn't, when I came to corporate, we wanted to introduce, all of these things. And we had a really successful, good PR department. And I had to look them in the eye and say, I know you're successful, but we need to change. And you don't necessarily have the skills that we need. So we need to do two things. We needed to paint that vision and get people excited about it, not beat them up, right? So that everybody really wanted to get there. But so we had a dual problem. One, we needed to help people get there who were traditional PR people, and we needed to recruit new talent. And some of that just came naturally. So to answer your question, people that can think visually is really, really important. So I actually did 20 years of marketing before I came into communications. And I think sometimes we're looking for some of those skills that come from marketing, that marketing would traditionally have into communications. So we don't just want writers. Writers are really, really important, but they also need to write things like scripts, for example.
You said when you started that process, you thought the department was doing it wrong. What were they doing wrong? What was wrong?
Okay, they weren't doing anything wrong. They were doing what they thought was right. They were producing. Well, I started off as a regional communicator, so I was running EMEA, and I think I was getting something like 28 press releases from corporate a month. Has anyone experienced that, where they just chuck them over the wall at you and go, "Could you please release this?" And you've got no resources.
I think every journalist experiences it.
Right, every journalist experiences it, and every PR experiences it. So first of all, it was like, we can't do this to our teams around the world anymore, and we cannot do this to journalists. So, this was a number of years ago, but we said, let's really start to utilize our blogs. And the reason why our PR people were so nervous about it was because our product people were nervous about it. And they said, I can't go back to that product leader and tell him he's not going to get his press release, that he's going to get a blog. So I said, all right, well, send him to me. I'll be the bad guy, you be the good guy. And what we found was most leaders accepted it. There was one or two that didn't. And they were like, well, where are my, X amount of articles? When they saw that they were getting 5,000 views a year later on the blog, their attitude changed. So sometimes you've got to say to somebody, look, give me 6 months, but we've got to try this. The press releases are dying. So yeah, it's sometimes just about painting the vision, taking the leap, coming out of our comfort zones and doing something different.
Okay, the press release is dying. We have a couple of minutes, so I just wanted to see if there is a chance for anyone in the audience. I think we have time just for one question. Does anyone? We have one right at the front here. Do we have a microphone or? Yeah, just here, this gentleman. Oh, are you going somewhere else? Okay. Okay, we've got one back there.
Oh.
Way back here, thanks.
That's fine.
So I'm Abe Smith. I'm the president of a company called Cision, a provider of PR technology.
Hello.
Hey, Stella, you made a good point around marketing and comms. Can you talk about your experience of how traditional marketing functions and communications are merging, so that sort of the convergence of paid, owned, and earned? Are you seeing that from your view?
Yeah, look, I made sure that the head of branding and the head of digital were my best friends, because I don't know everything and I can't do everything. I'm really, really not, and neither can my team. But when you've got that kind of relationship within the company with those people, then you can say, look, I've got an idea, or let's talk about an idea and how we can develop it together. So you saw the Realize 2030 campaign. It had a lot of help from marketing and digital. We did something similar a couple of years before, and it was really a PR campaign. And yeah, it got great coverage and stuff. But having paid behind it and making it paid, earned, and owned with website, etc., was, it just got the lift that we never got before. So I would say, if you don't know your marketing folks, you're missing a huge, huge trick of giving amplification to what you do. And yeah, definitely don't know all the answers.
Okay, in the last 40 seconds, I'm going to ask you, when we talked earlier, you had some strong views on agencies. How do you think they should change?
Oh gosh. So 5 years ago, when we were looking for agencies that could do all this stuff, they couldn't. And they'd say, well, you know, I know another agency I can introduce you to. Now I have agencies, and I have some really good agencies, but generally speaking, they'll say, yeah, I've definitely got a digital guy you can talk to, and oh, I'll bring in our social media experts, and you know, we've got good video people. And I say to them, I don't want 18 people to speak to. I want to speak to you about this campaign. And I think one of the problems with a lot of agencies today is that they tend to be siloed within their own organizations. And I would say, how can you bring that together so from the customer's perspective, they're only having to deal with one or two people rather than having to pull the pieces together themselves. I mean, and people will often say to me in agencies, well, don't worry, I will pull it together for you. But they don't. You know, often they don't understand the various medias. So, you know, that can be a challenge. I've got to say, though, it's got a lot better than 5 years ago, for sure. We're moving in the right direction.
Okay, excellent, good, excellent.
I think I've alienated half the room by
excellent advice. I think, no, I'm sure you haven't. I'm sure you haven't. I think that's all we have time for. So if you could join me, I guess, in thanking Stella for her really fascinating insights.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Arun, for having an interesting conversation. Thank you so much, guys. A group photo together.